Proszę Państwa, mam przyjemność zapowiedzieć kolejnego gościa specjalnego, Rick Ferguson. Państwo, którzy byli wczoraj na imprezie integracyjnej w klubie Aviator, tu na górze hotelu, Ricka już widzieli w akcji, gdy prowadził stworzoną przez siebie grę wideo o cyberataku na data center w szpitalu. A Rick Ferguson jest Global VP Security Research w firmie Trend Micro. Jest bardzo znaną osobą w branży, jest doradcą organizowanego z inicjatywy Komisji Europejskiej Safer Internet Forum i Porozumienie na rzecz Bezpieczeństwa Informacji EURIM, liderem projektu w Europolu, dyrektorem inicjatywy Get Safer Online. Również dołączył do InfoSecurity Hall of Fame, czyli grona liderów bezpieczeństwa informacji. Już posiada bardzo duże doświadczenie, angażuje się w badania dotyczące zagrożeń sieciowych i internetowego czarnego rynku, zajmuje się problematyką wpływu technologii IT na bezpieczeństwo klientów indywidualnych i firm. No i jest aktywny w branży security od ponad 20 lat. Rick powie Państwu o takiej swojej subiektywnej wizji przyszłości, jak będą się rozwijać i metody ataków, i metody obrony, i jak wewnętrznie firmy powinny się na te przyszłe zagrożenia przygotowywać. Rick, I just introduced you and the title of your speech. So the floor is yours. Please come. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know what he said. I'm not sure what he said, but I think he said badania, which is like a blood test or something. So I don't know. Is that right? I don't know what plans you have, but that's just weird. So they asked me to talk a little bit about the future. And the conversation we had about what I was going to speak about ended up with a title that was about this long. And it was basically the future of everything. So this is a presentation about the future of everything. Where are we now, and where can we expect to go, and what does that mean from a security perspective? So I think future risks. Here's one, and this is a very near-term future risk. Definitely if you're a guy. I'm not sure if it applies to women as well, because I haven't tested. But a near-term future risk, if you use the toilets at this venue, you may well bang either your arm or your knee, or both, as I did, because the doors are really heavy and they don't open as far as you expect them to. Has anyone else had that problem, or is it just me? Yeah? So that's a near-term future risk to bear in mind. Looking further ahead, what are the drivers for all the changes that I'm going to talk about? And I wanted to try and keep the list relatively short. Obviously, there are many drivers for change in society in general, but I'm thinking in the terms that affect us as professionals and the worlds that we move and work in. Obviously, changes in the threat landscape. That goes without saying almost, but it's worth noting that think back over however long you've spent in this industry or interested in this industry. Think back to what the threat landscape looked like when you started and to what that looks like now. Certainly, in the years that I've been involved in security, we've seen a change not only in the physical manifestation or the digital manifestation of threats, how do they work, but also the motivations, the tools that are used, and in fact the threat actors who are behind the threats. So people now do different things with different tools for different reasons than they did, say, 10 years ago. And obviously in the coming 10 years we're going to see not the same amount of change, but we're going to see more change and faster change, because that's the way that change works. Not only in the threat landscape, but also in the second driver, I think, which is really important, underlying all of this change, is the convergence of the digital and the physical. And obviously, the technologies underlying that convergence are things like cloud and virtualization and where that's heading, not just where it is right now. The adoption of IoT, Internet of Things, and what is becoming now called IIoT, Internet of Industrial, or the Industrial Internet of Things, and operational technology that is becoming connected. It's worth remembering also while we're looking forwards here and we're looking at the future, a lot of the future, paradoxically, involves technology from the past being revisited and reworked to retrofit it, if you like, into our future environment. Some of the examples of that we covered in research at Trend, for example, was software-defined radio. There's a whole lot of important information globally that is exchanged or has historically been exchanged over protocols that relied on radio. These were not protocols designed for the internet, but of course they've been retrofitted to work online, so we now have software-defined radio as an example. We did some research into a protocol called AIS, which is a ship-to-shore protocol used in the shipping industry. Any vessel over a certain size has to broadcast on AIS its cargo manifest, where it's from, where it's going, data like that. And we know already that pirates in Somalia already use AIS as like a shopping list. So they'll kind of look online and go, oh, this one looks interesting, we should go and visit that ship. But we found some really scary vulnerabilities because this stuff was not designed with security in mind. This was designed for radio use. So we found using AIS, we could make a ship appear out of nowhere. We could put an oil tanker in a lake, and it would be there in the broadcast. We could just inject this kind of traffic. We could fake a man-in-the-water alert. We could fake a closest point of approach alert, which is when a ship is coming into port. These are things that will make a vessel change its course. And another thing that we could do was we could switch the frequency on the ship away from the one that's currently being used to communicate ship to shore, and the captain of the vessel will not be able to switch it back. So if those attackers begin to use those kinds of vulnerabilities, not only do they have a shopping list, but they can also put the boat where they want it to be, and then they can make it incommunicado. So these kinds of older technologies bring their own risks, particularly as we retrofit them into the new world. So threats, convergence of physical and digital, and I'm going to go into more detail about these things and hopefully say some contentious things. Governments. Governments are increasingly getting involved in regulation, legislation, and pressure. And not only that, but also the whole recent phenomenon of fake news and propaganda and control of social media and influencing of individual opinions. These are all important drivers. So we're going to look through some of these in detail, and let's make a quick pit stop first at regulation and legislation. This is certainly an area where governments are increasingly involved. Obviously, the most pressing concern in this area right now for all of us is GDPR. I'm sure you've already had probably more than one session on GDPR today or yesterday, right? Everyone's using that as a big stick to make you buy things right now. But the cost associated with GDPR is actually pretty huge. I saw a survey from one of the analyst organizations, and they were asking US companies how much they expected to spend on GDPR compliance. And depending on the size of the company, it was between $1 and $10 million US just on achieving compliance with GDPR. Other scary stuff is from surveys that we've done at Trend Micro, people don't seem to be ready. Of the people that we questioned, and it was a couple of thousand people spread through 4 different countries within the EU. 57% of the CISOs, CSOs, CEOs that we questioned, 57% said they were not ready, and they expect to be fined. And one of the things that I've heard is, well, they're not going to get fined because nobody ever gets fined for data breaches anyway. We had legislation before in all of our various countries about how do we handle data securely, and some countries had fines, but they were always very small. Don't forget Brexit, right? It sounds like Brexit's got nothing to do with GDPR. I'm not proud of my country for Brexit, let me make that very clear, but it's going to leave a big financial hole in European funding. And one analyst that I was reading just yesterday predicts that in the first year of GDPR, the EU could make 6 billion in fines. If they've got a big financial hole, they will be very keen to levy fines on organizations. That goes without saying. And they can do it immediately. 20 million euros or 4% of your annual turnover, whichever one is higher. They're big numbers. Not only that, but there's the big debate in the US about net neutrality, which looks like it's about to be overturned again. So ISPs can begin prioritizing traffic and making people pay for extra services or extra access. Take that in in line with the other thing I said about governments with cyber propaganda, fake news, influencing of people's opinions, and then imagine a lowest tier of internet access, the cheapest internet access in America, which only includes Yahoo search engine, Breitbart, and InfoWars. And if you want to access any other news, you have to pay more money. You can begin to put these things together and see how they influence one another. So regulation and legislation is a big shaper of the future. As far as organizations go, what does the organization of the future look like? Many of you are probably heading there right now, but it is much less physically defined in terms of infrastructure, in terms of management, even in terms of physical location on the planet. We're talking, of course, about the continuation of virtualization. How many of you, just a show of hands, how many of you have finished your virtualization projects within your organizations? Yeah, that's a big question, right? That's the point. This is something which is never going to stop. You're virtualizing, and then you're moving to a private cloud model, and then you're maybe moving to a hybrid cloud model, and cloud is now no longer the end, because we begin to talk about other scenarios. In trying to come up with because I was asked to say, what does the company of the future look like? Remember, we're talking future now, so one of the things, hopefully, that stands out to you is in my legacy box, I've got containers. So in the organization of the future, even containers is legacy technology. So we move from virtualization to private cloud to hybrid cloud. We're moving at the moment into technologies like Docker, where we begin to use containers and containerization as a technology. But the movement beyond that is more into the serverless environment. So in the enterprise of the future, we're talking about a business which, can anyone see something that's missing from this picture? Network. There's no network. So the organization of the future doesn't care about the network. It's all hostile anyway. Forget about infrastructure. All infrastructure is hostile and would treat all infrastructure that way. The business focuses on business processes. On the left-hand side of the screen, the users and the things, the innumerable things connected to the corporate infrastructure, and all of the users could be anywhere. This is globally distributed. Every user has multiple different profiles depending on the activity that they're carrying out within an organization. So you get more granular about your authentication and access management depending on time of day, location, equipment being used, function being fulfilled. Security is focused on those business processes, and in terms of what the back end looks like, you've got some legacy container stuff. Everything else is focused on a serverless infrastructure, on a third-party network with machine learning and artificial intelligence taking care of mountains of data that is beyond human capacity to deal with. That's where all of your enterprises are heading. Any enterprise of any size is heading this way, and any smaller enterprise is heading towards using services built on enterprises of this size. That's, I think, as simple as it gets in terms of the organization of the future. Threats of the future. The threat landscape is something I referred to at the beginning. The areas that I think are still ripe for growth certainly is nation-states and nation-state surrogates being more involved in threats than they already have been. We've certainly seen, so the Pornstorm image there. Pornstorm is what Trend Micro calls something that you might know as APT-28, one of the Russian state-aligned attack groups. Unlike some others at Trend Micro, we won't go as far as to say this is Russian nation-state activity, because we like to be honest. And there is no definitive proof that will tell you that APT-28, Pornstorm, whatever you want to call it, is state-sponsored. That proof doesn't exist. And I think in security it's important to be truthful and it's important to be accurate. What we can say beyond doubt is the activities of this group and others are aligned to the same interests as the Russian state. So they are nation-state aligned or surrogate attacks for sure. We'll see far more involvement, and not just from Russia, not just from China. We know that the US is involved. I know that my own country is involved in developing offensive capabilities. This is the new normal. So that will become far more prevalent. Political causes, distributed denial of service attacks are already kind of a blunt weapon that is widely used. But with the development of IoT, even over the course of the last probably 12 months, not even 18 months, we've seen the Mirai botnet, Then we saw the Perserai botnet. Then we saw the Reaper botnet. These are all botnets based on compromised IoT devices. And in the case of Mirai, that was used for the distributed denial of service attack against DNS, the highest spike in traffic from that DDoS botnet was 1.2 terabits per second. That's the biggest DDoS that we've ever seen. And it didn't use any kind of amplification techniques. This was just raw power. And that's facilitated by an IoT botnet. When you look at the estimates for how much stuff will be out there in the future, it's a scary thought. 3.3 billion connected things in smart cities alone by next year. 30 billion connected things globally by 2020. And if we don't start doing something about engineering and security standards, we're headed for a world of hurt when it comes to threats powered by connected technology. Obviously, private threat actors continue to flourish, continue to make money, repurposing old tools and techniques and developing new ones. They are now developing technology, for example, to overcome machine learning because you're all adopting machine learning as a defensive technology, so they have a vested interest in overcoming that. We're thinking that criminals in the future may start to use blockchain for their own advantage because blockchain introduces a lot of obfuscation. And if you can obfuscate something as an attacker, that's a good tool. So you may find blockchain with criminal uses. And of course, attacks on the supply chain. As everything becomes more integrated and more virtual, if you can inject your malicious activity or your malicious process somewhere outside of the area of focus, then your chance for amplified consequences or unpredictable consequences from a defender's perspective are much higher. So you really need to begin examining those supply chain risks. It's the usual suspects, it's the same people, but what's key is that these same people will be using different tools, different techniques that will be constantly updated, and they have a singular advantage over you or over the security industry. You and security vendors, we all have to play with an open hand. Everybody knows what defenders can do and what tools and techniques are available to them, and you have to play by the rules. But when you're in the offensive capability, you do not have to play by the rules. You do not have to use publicly available tools and techniques, and you can exchange hints and tips with like-minded criminals all over the world. So in terms of getting ahead of the curve when it comes to the threat, it's very difficult. It is an area where machine learning is helping, but as I said, the attackers are adopting machine learning as well. So technology that's just on the horizon, there's some very interesting things out there. When we talk about connected devices, an area that's of great focus to the military, did anybody see the robot that could do backflips online? Skynet, right? Like not long ago, it was difficult to think of a robot that could walk successfully. This one was jumping up massive steps and then doing a backflip and then standing up again and going, hey, want to die? Or something like that. I don't know if that's what it said, but it's what it looked like to me anyway. And that's the first step. The military are already talking about autonomous weaponry. Autonomous weaponry. This is a weapon that can select its own targets and engage with no human interaction. Now that's Skynet. That's already possible. There's already a petition in front of the United Nations signed by 120 leading scientists and academics for a United Nations ban on autonomous weaponry. But if we're not careful, that's the world we're heading for. Killer robots is a reality. I saw another interesting thing online. What happens to you when you die? What happens to you individually when you die online? Already Facebook have this kind of Facebook memorial page thing where somebody else can look after your Facebook. Facebook will go away. It's only us old people that use Facebook now anyway. I saw a service called Infinimi. It's in beta right now. I've applied to join, but they haven't accepted me. And what it does, this is a scary thought, really, honestly. What it does is it scours all of your online activity. You give it the details for your Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, your Snapchat, your YouTube. And it also does search engine searches for you all throughout your lifetime. And then when you die, it becomes you. And it can participate in conversations on your behalf from the grave. This is the world we're heading for. So not physical immortality, but digital immortality. But then think about, Microsoft put their own AI on Twitter recently, and they had to pull it really quickly. They put their AI on Twitter, and it was learning from all the conversations that it had, And within a very short period of time, it turned into a neo-Nazi anti-Semite, and they had to pull it offline because it was learning from all the people that were talking to it. And that's unfortunately what humans are like. So what happens to you when you die? You won't know, but you'll go on living digitally. Think about connected vehicles. They are constantly scouring the environment around them, collecting information from various sensors and various sources. They're exchanging information vehicle to vehicle so they can manage traffic globally more effectively. But take that world of the future, because autonomous vehicles are not tomorrow, but they're quite close. In fact, the CEO of Volvo Cars has already gone on record saying, I think it was by 2020, nobody will ever die in one of our cars. A bold boast, we'll see. Considering someone's already died in a Tesla, it's maybe a bit risky, we'll see. But what's the terrorist weapon of choice today? What is the most popular, effective vehicles? Vehicles, right? Cars, trucks, whatever. We've seen it obviously in London a couple of times, Barcelona, Nice, New York. It's a global phenomenon. They're easy to get hold of. They're very dangerous if you use them wrongly, and they can inflict a lot of damage. So what happens if you have a fleet of autonomous vehicles online from the same manufacturer that all have the same vulnerability that allows remote exploitation? What are you handing to the terrorists? If we don't secure our supply chain and instill a secure development lifecycle in vendors of connected devices, whether it's vehicles or anything else, again, world of trouble. So one of the things I would like to see is a European standard for these kind of connected devices, where if you don't get the stamp, you're not allowed to sell it. We already do it with things like batteries to stop them catching fire. Let's start doing it with connected devices as well, because there are real-world physical consequences. We talk about the smart factory, the automated supply chain, ICS and SCADA becoming connected. Think about the possibilities from an extortion perspective. If I could affect the baggage handling capability at Heathrow Airport for 10 minutes, think of the chaos. How much money could I ask for from Heathrow Airport not to break their baggage handling SCADA implementation? Highly automated. There are huge possibilities. So when it comes to the role of the CISO, I was waiting for you to get to the last. When it comes to the role of the CISO, I guess it is the hardest job in tech, because as a job it has to evolve as quickly as, or maybe even quicker than, the environment that you're working in. Because the environment you're working in reflects today, the problems of today, the business needs of today, but you have to constantly be thinking forward. So I think how the role has changed over time, when CISO, CIO first became a thing, CSO, it was I think it was a very risk-aware position, the original CISO position. As time has moved on, it became threat and cyber-aware, moving away from pure risk calculation and management actually to thinking about threats, how do threats happen, what are threat actors, what's the mechanics. But I think the next evolution, and this is going to be driven by technology and by legislation, is a much more privacy and data-aware CISO. You will become the CISO outside of IT. Right now, you're the CISO or the CIO in IT, and the future of that position is outside IT. It will be much more strategy-focused and much more business-focused. The future of your role relies on understanding business requirements and business strategy. You'll probably have an information security manager inside the IT department reporting to you. But your CISO role, you'll be the CISO outside IT, you'll be focused on risk and strategy, and you probably should prepare for that right now. Information security in general, I was trying to find just a few words to characterize how I see that in the future. It absolutely needs to be dynamic. It needs to be something which is changing on demand, that's responding within the microsecond in terms of being able to provide up-to-date, contextually important and relevant information, and for the same reason needs to be smart. Absolutely needs to be distributed. Obviously, we're talking now about cloud as a scalable global technology, but it will have to be pushed to what's being called cloud edge as it becomes future, because speed of delivery is key, maybe geolocation is really important. It will need to be embedded. This is the point I was making about connected devices and IoT. If we don't start building security into devices as they are manufactured, we're going to create a toxic legacy of connected products that simply won't go away. And one area that I think is overlooked in security right now is deception. I think deception has a role to play in near-term security products. I don't think it will last forever. No security ever does. That's an impossible ask. But if you could have, for example, a virtual network in a box full of virtually interesting stuff created by machine learning based on your real network that looks very attractive to an attacker, but no one ever goes there, as soon as someone's in your fake network, not only do you have a red flag, but you can follow them around and see what you do because it's not a breach and it's not important. Deception has a big role to play in future security. A lot of people say that data is the new oil, that data is more valuable than oil. You can make more profit from data than you can from oil. And if data is the new oil, then algorithms are the new refineries. It's not really about the data. Getting hold of large amounts of data now is not difficult. Just have a subscription to the Twitter hosepipe and you'll see how much data comes out of that. What's really key to success is what you do with that data and how you do it. And remember, because I'm not a huge mathematics guy, right? I actually used to get in a lot of trouble in maths lessons at school. I blame the teacher. Remember that algorithm is not about maths. An algorithm is used in maths, but an algorithm is also used in the kitchen. An algorithm is nothing more than a recipe, a set of instructions, a set of directions. So what you learn to do, what you decide to do with the data that's being held by your business, whether that's data about your customers and your core competence, or whether that's data about security and threats to your organization, what you do with that data, how you make it contextual and relevant and eliminate the mess and get rid of the false positives, that's the future power of the security within your organization. It's important to get real. Put down the hash pipe and start owning up to the vulnerabilities that do exist in your organization. You're not the best CISO, the best security manager, the best security analyst on the planet. You're simply not. None of us are. You don't have the best team, you haven't bought the best technology, and you probably didn't implement all of it correctly anyway. Realize that up front and actually begin to own it and do something about it. It's no shame because it's true of everybody, but you've got to get real. Own the risks to your business. Remember that you don't know what you don't know. You may look at something and assume that you completely understand it and get it, but then you may look at it from another direction and find out that it says something completely different. You don't know what you don't know, and what you see is what you check. If you're not checking something, you're completely blind to the output and the implications of that thing. Don't rely on compliance to be security. It happened with PCI DSS. Everybody went, I'm PCI DSS compliant, I have a secure organization. Bullshit. It's going to happen with GDPR. People will go, finally, I spent my 10 million, I'm GDPR compliant, everything is cool. No. Compliance is table stakes. Compliance is your ticket to do business. That's all. It's not security. Security is not a destination. Security is an aspiration that you must constantly strive to achieve, and the goalposts will keep moving all the time. Don't confuse the two. When people talk about security posture, this isn't one. Does this remind anyone of anything they read in the news yesterday? Transportation organization? You can't do that. Uber's going to get in very, very big legal trouble. They're just lucky it's not GDPR yet. Imagine that had happened on May the 19th next year. But still, they had a legal duty to report. They didn't. They gave money to the people that attacked them. It wasn't a pen test. This is not a security posture. So, final messages. Never forget these things. These are constants that no matter what happens with your environment, with technology, with the threat, with the regulatory environment, these are constants. Assume compromise. Assume that your business is already compromised. Not that it will be, that it is. Work on the assumption that bad people are already inside your business. If you're going to fail, make sure you fail closed or fail secure. Don't just fail open and go, I don't know what to do. Because, again, that's not a security posture. Remember, what you see is what you check. Check everything. When implementing technology, don't just think about all the cool things that the salesperson told you it was going to do for you. Think about what happens if I press this button. Always consider the misuse case. The use case is easy. It's in all the sales documentation. You know what it's going to do for your business. The salesperson has given you pie charts and graphs and everything. But what happens if someone uses it in an unexpected way? Remember that listening is learning. I think it was the Dalai Lama that said, when you talk, You're only expressing what you already know. But when you start listening is when you start learning. So spend less time telling other people how to do things correctly. Spend more time listening to the experiences of others and learning from them. Remember that security is that destination, and that it should always be focused on the business. It's not security for security's sake. It's security to enable the business to operate in a more effective, customer-focused, business-focused, profit-driven, at the end of the day, fashion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.